All right, ladies and gentlemen, it appears that Glaive Keo is back at it again. Bro has been on an unstoppable streak lately, pumping out videos faster than he's ever been before. And this time, the topic of the matter is something pretty important. Pretty important when it comes to the overall Wuthering Waves community. And that's the fact that, well, the WuWa community isn't toxic. Or isn't that toxic at all, especially when compared to other games, specifically those under the Hoyoverse umbrella. I think a lot of content creators, a lot of people in the community have gotten themselves into the mindset that just because a game is getting unwarranted, harsh, or unnecessary critiques, that those defending against those critiques are enforcing toxic positivity. I think the worst thing that a developer can do, or one of the worst things a developer can do, is listen to a vocal minority of the player base whose suggestions, if listened to and acknowledged, would actively make the game worse. And I think that players that are, more knowledgeable about the situation, more aware of what's actually going on, and are, basically combating those erroneous takes with reasons for why those takes aren't that good in the first place, isn't something that's toxic, isn't something that's negative. And a lot of people, like I said before, have gotten themselves into the mindset that talking down any critique means that you're now a toxically positive community. And the thing is, sometimes there are just bad takes that don't make sense, and deciding to mitigate those takes, go ahead and validate them because they are invalid in the first place. There's nothing really wrong with that. You're just actively making the game better by not incorporating dumb suggestions. And so with that, I'm excited to hear what Glaive's take is on this entire matter, because this is something that's been boiling up for a while. Calling an L take isn't that big of a deal. So let's see what he's got to say about this whole situation. And of course, we have a very interesting creator featured at the 0-second mark in the video. Let's get right on into it.
All right, so here we go again. Another day, another drama in the gacha community, and this time Wuthering Waves is at the center of it. But let's be clear, this isn't some scandal sparked by a particular content creator anymore. No, this is a work.
I actually realized that he hasn't taken many shots at EO in the past couple of vids, and so maybe like EO was like on cooldown, a reference to EO, and now that shit just came off cooldown for this vid, because within the first 10 seconds we already have a shot.
Work of a very loud, very opinionated, and hopefully very small minority. Wuthering Waves 2.1 update dropped about a week ago, and as expected, gacha content creators wasted no time sharing their thoughts.
2.1 before Stop!
Some called it the best glow up since launch, praising the improvements and quality of life changes.
Y'all said he was gonna mention Shinya again. I do believe he mentioned Shinya positively this time around. So you guys were wrong. You guys were wrong. He was using Shinya as credit right there. Look at that. I didn't see any jokes in here.
Others, they claimed it to be the worst patch ever, like the game had suddenly crumbled overnight. But let's be clear, nobody, not a single person said that it was perfect, because it wasn't. And that's actually a good thing, because, it's Wuthering Waves, it's Kuro Games. Unlike certain other developers, they actually listen. Kuro Games has been making steady improvements every patch, fixing what needs fixing and refining what's already great. They take community feedback seriously, whether it's from surveys or content creators calling things out in videos. So it's honestly shocking to see this weird narrative pop up that the Wuthering Waves community is somehow becoming the thing they hated most.
And like I said before, a lot of people are getting themselves riled up on this idea that just because somebody is defending the game, that means that they're turning it to Genshin Impact. It just means that they're defending the game most of the time against critiques that they don't think make sense. Because if developers are spending time fixing issues or providing brainstorming solutions to problems that either aren't actually that big or don't actually exist, that means that that's manpower, that's work hours, that's effort, that's money being put into things that won't actually help out the game. And sure, we might not know the full impacts of like every single decision being made, but you're making solutions, or you're making theory crafting solutions, and people are theory crafting why those solutions don't work. And if one side has a lot more proof, a lot more backing, a lot more concrete calculations than the other, that doesn't mean that they're just toxic positive. That means that they're just quite literally proving those bad suggestions wrong most of the time.
You know exactly what that's referring to. That is just completely out of touch with reality. The truth is, this community thrives on criticism, and that is exactly why the game keeps getting better. This isn't even the first time someone pushed this idea. Months ago, Lol Shinya made a similar comment about Wuthering Waves community. No hate to him, guy's great, but he's not exactly the glue that is holding the system together. But let's focus on what actually kicked off this
All right, maybe I was wrong. He did put in a shot there.
Round of discourse. A tweet claiming that the WuWa community is slowly becoming what they hated most. Truly embarrassing. First of all, nice typo. If I didn't know any better, I thought this was an official Kuro Games announcement. Because let's be honest, Kuros and typos are like peanut butter and jelly at this point. If that ain't no typo, it ain't no Kuro. And the confidence in this take is just impressive. Someone responded with actual logic, pointing out that this community shift was really just one dumb person making a dumb post. And instead of re-evaluating, our guy doubles down with, did I say the whole WuWa community? No, but slowly. Ah yes, the Mr. Pokey type tweet. I've seen this way too many times. I can't be wrong if I make my claim vague enough strategy. If you push back, they'll just move the goalpost. But plot twist, Tectone replies, and suddenly all of that confidence evaporates. The guy folds instantly, going from bold social commentary to, oh, hello, techie. I honestly have no idea if what I posted is incorrect or not.
Not gonna lie, this guy's got a bit of a limp dick. Boy, this guy needs some Viagra stat. Holy moly. I'm not gonna lie, after this, I might re-roll the Twitter account. Gonna be honest, that thing is bricked. That's like minus 1,000 street cred right there. Minus 5,000 aura. I mean, assuming that there was 5,000 aura to lose in the first place. He's probably in the negative value right now, but... Ooh, man.
To be fair, I would also fold in the presence of the big T. But that's just a funny side note. It's not the actual problem here. The issue here is that there's this growing belief that Kuro bots, aka Wuthering Waves' more dedicated fan base, just can't take criticism. And I don't know what alternate reality these people live in, but that's just flat out wrong. The logic behind this whole argument is completely backwards. Kuro Games actively engages with player feedback. It's just their game based on criticism and even acknowledges community memes in official live streams.
The players themselves give so much feedback already to Kuro Games about like things that can actually be improved and actually be fixed. And the thing is, when you have these devs actually going in and consistently making an amazing update to the game every single patch, you know for sure that these guys are actually listening, that they're actually keeping in mind what players want the most, and they're actually playing the goddamn game. They talk about their experiences, right, of like using Varina and versus like Shorekeeper, all of those things. And it's clear they have their ear to the ground. And the thing is, when you actually have a dev that's receptive, when you have a dev that will take feedback, listen to it, and implement a good portion of it, you want to make sure that the feedback that they're getting is legitimate. You want to make sure that they don't, again, spend time doing something that's not actually necessary and prevent them from doing things that are. When you work on something, when you dedicate a workforce to something, that means that they're not working on something else. And that's called an opportunity cost, ladies and gentlemen. Think about all of the bullshit quality. I'm just gonna pull up an example. Imagine all of the work hours that were spent in Genshin Impact deciding this stupid ass feature where now you can just filter to select a certain type of element of character, and then they like put up the artifact screen at the same time so that it looks like the artifact selector, but it's not. Like at first glance, they like even intentionally designed it so that it looks like an artifact selector, but it's just not. One of the most useless features they have ever added to the game. If something like this was to be added, it should have been added like years ago. And the fact that it's being added now when there's just a way better comprehensive fix that they should have had in terms of just adding the artifact selector in the first place. Oh man. Imagine what they could have been working on instead. Imagine all of the money, the work hours, the budget put into useless garbage trash like this, and think about what could have been worked on in the game instead. And Hoyoverse has a track record of finding the most worthless things to buff as quality of life and just going ahead and doing them. Remember like their recommended, like their fast equip, like recommended, holy shit. That thing was just absolutely doo-doo water. It would just equip like the most random shit ever to your character and actually be worse than like you just going in and spending 1 or 2 minutes doing it yourself. There's just so much useless stuff that nobody uses that they tout off as like some amazing fix. And it's because there's somebody somewhere suggesting this when it's completely trash and it doesn't help the game at all. And people just don't want that for Wuthering Waves. They don't want that wasted effort.
比如提升暴击相关，所以说啊，大家总是提及的维里奈，我们的维神的加班压力，在首尔
Oh yeah, the Varina bot. Yep.
终于可以解放了，太好了！
我队伍最缺的一块拼图就要拼上了。
If the devs themselves are open to criticism, why wouldn't the players be? If people are trying to say WuWa fans are thin skins and allergic to criticism, then what exactly do you call the game's constant improvements? Because last I checked, constructive criticism is what got us the major quality of life changes in 2.1. Now, if this were Genshin, I would understand the frustration. Hoyoverse doesn't listen unless there's a lawsuit involved, or a rivaling game is threatening their monopoly on the gacha space. You know they're panicking if they ever hand out a free 5-star selector, because at that point, the downfall of the game is officially here. Oh wait, they did give out a 5-star selection. And look, Genshin players have been stuck in that ecosystem for way too long. They're invested financially and emotionally. When things don't go their way, they don't just take the L, they cope hard. It's a classic sunk cost fallacy of no return. They've already spent too much time.
A lot of people think that Kuro added that boss just so that there could be jokes made about Genshin Impact. I'm starting to believe that rumor is actually true. They're like, damn, 2.0 is fucking cooking. Yeah, but just put this boss in the game so people can use it as a reference for later. Because think about it this way. The fallacy of no return is just one of the most like abstract names you could ever give to a fucking boss. Nobody still really knows what it means or like why it was even named that in the story. It's been used just to meme the sunk cost fallacy for Genshin, HSR, and like ZZZ players. That's like all it's been used for. And nobody actually thinks about what it actually does in the lore, if we're being entirely 1000% honest. Nah, goated name, I don't even know what it means. Exactly.
Energy and money to walk away. So instead, they doubled down. And I think that's where a lot of this misplaced criticism is actually coming from. So let's be clear. Wuthering Waves does not need some defending. The game is doing fine, and most players are totally okay with valid, constructive criticism.
Absolutely. If your criticism is legitimate, things like, oh, I think that farming 1-cost echoes should be faster, 1000% valid. I think that 4-cost echoes should have a lower respawn time, or they should be as fast to access as they are in early access, 1000% fine. These are things that are pretty much objectively like clunky with the game. Like pretty much, yeah, objectively clunky with the game would improve the overall experience and like not take away anything from like the process at all, right? And not take anything away from the gameplay at all if implemented. There are a ton of other suggestions to that list that I'm just not thinking of off the top of my head. But when you come in with a take that's pretty universally agreeable, yeah, nobody's going to disagree with you about it. But when you come in with like a super hot-headed opinion, right, about things that not every player has experienced or maybe only affects like the smallest portion of players, and then you're looking for like wide sweeping updates to the game or like the complete overhaul of like systems that are, in most cases, like pretty fine, then people are just going to be, in question of the decision making because they know that, again, all the time spent reworking what people are suggesting, that could go into different things for the game, different features, new things.
Completely okay when you don't pull out arguments out of your ass, which is something that can't be said for the bad faith criticism running wild recently. And here's how it goes down every single time. Someone throws out a completely bad faith take, something exaggerated, disingenuous, or just straight up wrong. People call them out, and suddenly the narrative flips into, why are you refusing criticism? Are you just saying WuWa is perfect? It's a bait and switch, and it is exhausting. The moment someone gets pushed back for a bad take, they pivot into playing the victim. And that is why this whole discourse is so messy, because half the time it's not about actual criticism at all. It is just about stirring the pot. And that's where the real damage happens. Because when bad faith criticism runs unchecked, it doesn't just create noise. The damage isn't just some petty internet drama. In the worst case scenario, it actively warps public perception, divides communities, and even throws game development off track. With that being said, let's talk about the consequences of letting bad faith criticism spread. First up is the distorted perception. Bad faith criticism doesn't just sit in the corner of Twitter where it belongs. No, it spreads fast, and suddenly a game that people might have genuinely enjoyed gets completely written off before it even has a chance. You get review bombs, toxic comment sections, and casual players second guessing whether they should even bother trying it. And we've seen this play out before. Look at League of Legends. As much as you want to give it hate, it is one of the most well-designed, strategically deep games out there. But do people talk about that? No. They talk about how toxic the player base is, how weird the content creators are. It's a joke at this point. If you play League, apparently, you don't shower, you don't touch grass, and you're the weirdest person alive. That's how powerful negativity can be.
Hey, but League of Legends players, wait, one thing's for certain, they take it all in stride. You ask a League of Legends player if they think their game is dog shit, if they think the game sucks ass, if they think League of Legends is in the worst state it's ever been, all they'll tell you is yes. All they will tell you is yes. League players might have the biggest ego in the world, but they're also like the least egotistical in the world, because they will all actively make fun of themselves and think less of themselves for playing the game. They all know that their time is better spent doing other things, but they are just actually hopelessly addicted. It's one of the most honest communities in gaming as a whole. Literally one of the most honest. So you got to give them credit for that. You have to give them credit for that.
Doesn't matter if a game is great. If the loudest voices say it's trash, that's what sticks. And then you got the community division, or as I like to call it, how to start a civil war in your own fandom. Mr. Pokey is really good at this. Bad faith criticism doesn't encourage real discussion. It just forces people into corners. Instead of working together to make a game better, you get this ridiculous us versus them dynamic. One side is defending a game no matter what, the other side is tearing it down just for the sake of it, and guess what gets lost in the middle? Actual useful feedback. And suddenly people aren't talking about real issues anymore, like Echo EXP, tuner problems, or why we still don't have flight in 1.x. No, instead they're busy arguing over whether or not criticism is even allowed. And at that point, nothing productive is happening. And then there's developer misalignment. Developers listen to feedback, and that's just a fact. At least the ones outside of the Genshin Impact dev team, right? But when the loudest voicers are coming out from bad faith critics, that feedback loop gets completely wrecked. Devs end up feeling pressure to respond to outrage instead of focusing on real issues.
Sometimes outrage is actually good. Let's be entirely 100% honest about that. Sometimes outrage from the community is actually good. I can think of several times in Genshin Impact's history where they actually had to like apologize and like fix certain things. I think that there is one example of like a good fix and there's one example of a bad fix. I think whatever the fuck they did with Zhang Li and how they like felt the need to like emergency buff him because like China thought that like their, I don't know, like their emperor analog like wasn't doing that good or like wasn't that strong was like a little bit weird and kind of set like an odd precedent for the game really early on in this release. I thought that was a weird case. On the other hand, for Nuvalet, where they actively nerfed one of his mechanics before the Mualani banner, and then the player base threw like an outrage on how they were like actively nerfing a character's mechanics, I think that was fine, because now we're going ahead and we're fundamentally changing how the game works for a lot of people. Or the mechanic that I'm talking about is setting your mouse DPI to like 7,000 using the Nuvalet hydro cannon and then like spinning around like a fucking freak. I can see why they wanted to remove it, but it's also like something dumb for people to do. And so it's like when you're like actively making the game worse with the updates, sure, go for it. That's something that people are enjoying. It's not like hurting anybody, blah, blah, blah. Don't remove it. And those situations, right, are few and far between, but it's enough. It's enough for these devs to actually get off their ass and make a compensation fix. Same with the ZZZ and like their censorship. I believe it was referred to Gooner 911. I do believe like the whole like, yeah, like their camera thing getting like like censoring like the characters as you get closer and closer. That was called like the Gooner 911. Sure, right? That's what people are playing the game for. Let them have whatever they're having there. Go for it. Outbursts in those occasions are completely warranted, right? Because that's what people think is literally just going to make their game worse, and it's only going to make their game worse with nothing in exchange.
They make changes they don't need to make, just to quiet the noise, and the game starts drifting away from what actually matters. One well-cited example is the Star Wars Battlefront 2. During its development, the team was bombarded by vocal minority of critics who focused almost exclusively on the game's loot box and progression mechanics. Under that pressure, the developers made a rapid performative changes aimed at quieting the outrage rather than addressing deeper design concerns. The result was a game that, while trying to appease its loudest voices, drifted away from its original vision and ultimately hurt its reputation. So this whole thing isn't just about annoying internet discourse. This is about how bad takes can literally derail a game's development.
I think the whole Star Wars Battlefront 2 thing is I wouldn't say it's necessarily caused by the players here. I think that was just like the devs being a bunch of absolute clowns, where they locked all of the progression behind the loot boxes, and it was like a completely uncooked idea in the first place. Like, you might be familiar with the whole like a sense of pride and accomplishment meme. That was like the most downvoted comment in Reddit history. It had around like minus 600k, and it was basically just the EA devs for Battlefront 2 telling all the players that like paying money to unlock the things was the pride and accomplishment, versus like actually going into the game and, you know, grinding the levels and unlocking like Darth Vader and like Luke Skywalker Joker by yourself, right? You were doing it with the help of a credit card. And so I think that that's just like the devs or really the publisher in that scenario being like an absolutely greedy fuck versus the players having too much of a play into it. So I think that that example's a little bit, if he's saying it in the way that I think he's saying it, I think that one's maybe a little bit undercooked here.
Addressing deeper design concerns. The result was a game that, while trying to appease its loudest voices, drifted away from its original vision and ultimately hurt its reputation.
I think the original vision for Battlefront 2 was just dog shit. And so maybe it drifting away was actually a good thing. So yeah, maybe an undercooked example here.
This whole thing isn't just about annoying internet discourse. This is about how bad takes can literally derail a game's development. Instead of fixing actual problems, devs get caught up in performative fixes that make no real impact. So what's the solution? We'll get into that. But first, there is even a bigger issue. How good fake criticism is getting caught in the crossfire. And that is where things get really messy. Now, this whole problem isn't just some random Twitter user trying to stir the pot. It is bleeding into content creators who are actually trying to provide fair, constructive criticism. And for some reason, people are struggling to tell the difference between actual critique and just bad faith nonsense. Take Ryuku Sensei, for example. The guy is known Kurobot, probably one of the most diehard Wuthering Waves supporters out.
True, bro has like 2 UL80 accounts. And honestly, if you're familiar with just like playing the game, you know that it takes quite some time to farm up 2 UL80 accounts. And while the dailies process and stuff does get like a lot simpler, you still gotta do like all the story quests on both sides, right? All the character quests and stuff. I mean, it's certainly made easier by the fact that he probably plays through all the content on one account and then skips through on the rest. But I mean, hey, bro's still dedicated, man. Skip button actually changes the game for like multi-boxers. For people that have multiple accounts, yeah, the skip button's actually over fucking powered. 1,000,000%. Actually, this is light work. This is light work. Never mind. He's not, his achievement means nothing. I was just kidding. Disregard everything I just said.
But when he called out real issues like the Echo EXP grinds and tuners, people immediately started dismissing him. Skill issue, luck issue, it's not a game issue. Are you serious? That's not an argument. That's just plugging your ears and pretending there isn't a problem.
I know I've been on the record saying that it's mostly an RNG issue, right? And if you get fucked over by RNG, yeah, that sucks. And I'm not against the idea of people having ways or like a pity of some kind to limit their RNG. I just don't think it should be linked to tuners. And Ryuku's suggestion entirely focused on 3 main components. Remove the use of tuners in leveling echoes and allow tuners to reroll substats. And my point of view on it was, if you remove the need for tuners while leveling echoes in the first place, you are dramatically reducing how many tuners you have to use to level the echoes. And if you're now using all of those saved tuners to re-roll your echoes, now the devs have to do things like rebalance the echo economy, rebalance the tuner economy, do additional A/B testing to see like how many materials is enough. One of his suggestions was basically you can see all of the substats when you level an echo. And so if you see all the substats when you level an echo and you have to tune them to activate them, you're never going to spend tuners on an echo that has dog shit substats. And so if something just has like good subs in the first place, that's the only time you spend the tuners. You can also infinitely farm echo XP in the solution that he provided. And so you can kind of see how now there's a massive abundance of materials. And so I'm saying, well, you're removing the use of tuners on the upgrading side. And now you're saying tuners can be used for re-rolling and stuff too. And so my point of view of it was, well, now we've heavily limited how many tuners we have to spend. And now you're letting tuners do re-rolling. My point of view of it was, don't fuck with tuners at all. Simply add some kind of mechanic. I think Star Rail has the biggest example of it, where you can re-roll a substat and give that out like once or twice a patch. And that solves your issue of like you never getting the piece, right, with this one specific roll. And you don't have to give the devs the massive undertaking of rebalancing their entire economy. You just add a resource on top of it. And that to me is the way to go. You're not asking the devs to basically go in and rebalance every single thing possible. And with a substat reroller of some kind that's given out as like a separate currency, and you get that like once or twice a patch, you're good to go. You'll get your 1 or 2 guaranteed pieces a patch. I think that that's a pretty good pace to me. 1, free to play. 2, if you buy the BP. And that seems like a fair compromise, especially at this point in the game. Whales won't get their god pieces too quickly, and they now have that incentive, right? Oh, if I play this next patch, I'm gonna get 2 more of these rerolls reroller whatever things that we have going on. But buying it with tuners, awful idea. Just give it out as a separate resource that the devs can decide how often they want to give to the players versus letting the players either break their account by like rerolling stuff that they shouldn't, and you don't run into the situation of like rebalancing tuners everywhere else in the game.
And then there's Tectone. Love him or hate him. I mean, for the most part, love him, right? This man has played every gacha game under the sun. Maybe. I mean, the guy played Hello Kitty Island Adventure. Come on, man. If there's anyone who knows how to break a game's strengths and weaknesses, it's him. He's literally the gacha Jesus at this point. And here's the kicker. He actually likes Wuthering Waves. So if he's pointing out flaws, it's not because he wants the game to fail. It is because he wants it to get better. So why wouldn't you listen to someone like that? Even if you don't completely agree with Ryuku's suggested solutions, or maybe you don't like how Tectone brings up his points, the fact that they're bringing up a real issue should be enough to warrant a discussion. This isn't about blindly defending Wuthering Waves. The devs listen, they adjust, and they fix things. We've seen it happen time and time again. So with that track record, why wouldn't we trust them to do it again? Here's the real danger. When you start shutting down good faith criticism, you're not just silencing complaints, you are hurting the game in the long run.
And I think like while he was just on the topic of Techie, he's pretty spot on. Brotherman might not package his suggestions in the most palatable way possible for the general audience, but everything that he says, pretty like 90-something% of the time, is entirely valid. It's like a piece of toast that's been in the oven for too long. Sometimes you gotta like scrape away the crust a little bit of like, you know, maybe some of the flamboyant words and like the profanity that he's using in the initial take, and what's underneath is a perfectly fine piece of bread that you can still eat and like somewhat enjoy. That's what a lot of like Techie's like spiciest takes are, and that's really at the worst of it. Most of the time he does have like pretty well measured out stuffs. He does have like pretty well measured out takes that are generally palatable, but sometimes he does overcook it. One example of where he was right but overcooked it was saying that Whimpering Waste needs improvement. He said it needs improvement and then also called it like a dog shit terrible game mode, and I was just like, well, with the things that you suggested that would make it amazing, you only need like 1 or 2 small tweaks, right, to the game mode, and then it would be like perfectly fine by your definition. And so that's where I'm like, yeah, he's being like a little bit extra here, but I can understand where he's coming from.
First, you miss opportunities for real improvement. Games don't get better through blind praise. They get better through constructive feedback. And when that feedback gets ignored, these problems just linger longer than they should. Second, it discourages future criticism. If every single valid critique gets drowned in the backlash, fewer people are going to step up and voice their concerns. I mean, look at what happened to the Genshin creators, right? Look at what you did to them. And that doesn't just affect content creators, it affects everyone. At some point, players will just stop bothering, because what's the point of filling out surveys or making feedback posts if the community itself refuses to engage with it? And worst of all, you risk making developers defensive. Imagine being a dev team that actually listens to its community only to see players dogpile on anyone who dares to provide feedback. If that keeps happening, at some point, even the most receptive devs will start tuning it all out. And that is the worst case scenario ever, because then guess what? Nobody wins. The game stops improving, real concerns get lost in the noise, and then we end up in the same kind of mess that other gacha communities have struggled on for years. So what can we do about it? What can you guys as a community do about it? And what can I as a content creator do to help?
My viewpoint is the more you know about the game, the more you play the game, the more you understand it, the better equipped you are to provide feedback, to validate takes, to provide like backing, right, for reasoning. However, you want to make sure that you're keeping yourself at enough of a distance to not like be tunnel visioned on various parts of the game. There's like a fine balance that people have to run when it comes to like how they're viewing certain parts of the game. You want to make sure that you're close enough to understand the full scope of like what changes would do, what exactly is going on, but that you're not zoomed in so far as to just only look at the issue that's in front of you and not think about any of the downstream consequences of making changes. And so I would use Ryuku Sensei and his take on like tuners now being used to reroll substance as like a very like close up, zoomed in point of view on the issue of echo rolling needs to be changed, right? Or echo rolling needs to be like made more enjoyable. And a lot of the downstream implications of using tuners and many of the other changes that he suggested would require massive overhauling of the existing game systems and result in, you know, a lot of unintended consequences that would require the devs to completely rebalance the game. And that is a fuck ton of work for something that's already been running for close to a year in its existing place. Now players have to relearn how to use tuners, relearn how to optimize the expenditure of them, and it's a lot of like friction for something that can be solved as simply as adding a separate resource, a separate resource that just rerolls the substats, and then the devs give it out XYZ amount of times a patch. And so that's the whole thing, right? It's about having a well-rounded point of view, but not being so zoomed in to a topic that it prevents you from seeing everything else that would happen down the road. And that, I think, is the best take that anybody can have, regardless if you're a content creator, a viewer, regardless if you're just like a player. Don't get too caught up in the weeds, but also make sure you actually know what you're talking about.
I'm just going to sit back and watch. I want to see how this plays out, but when the time comes, oh, you know, I'm going to say what I think about it. But in the meantime, what do you think? Are the people confusing good faith criticism with bad takes? Is the backlash against fair critiques actually helping or hurting Wuthering Waves? Let me know in the comments down below. Don't forget to subscribe and actually have a real discussion.
It's really not that nuanced, actually. People make stupid ass suggestions, and oftentimes they will use the shield of, oh, I'm just providing criticism. Oh, you're just being toxically positive by saying that my critique is bad, when in reality, their critique is bad. And oftentimes, right, a critique can also be good, but it can also have elements to it that are not as thought out or a bit more negative. And pointing out where somebody's solution has problems and then basically, you know, working into a way to make that solution better also isn't a problem either. It's got to be a give and take process across both sides. And this is where the issue does get a little bit more nuanced, is just because somebody is saying that there's something wrong with part of a suggestion, that doesn't mean that they're saying that the entire suggestion is bad, especially if they're providing all of the reasons for why. So with that, let me know what you all think. This was a pretty crazy ass video. Peace out.